All right, y'all. Sorry, there's like an issue with YouTube real quick, so give me a second. I'm just trying to fix it, and hopefully people will be able to jump in. Okay, let's see. It's 24 of y'all in here. Sweet. All right, y'all. So we're going to go ahead and get started with the session. There's a couple things I'm going to cover. Just a heads up, whether you're on YouTube or Microsoft Teams, use the chat section so that you guys can throw out questions. Obviously, you can't unmute yourself in YouTube. You're just watching this. But if you're on Teams, feel free at any point to unmute yourself, ask the question. It'll just go a lot more smoothly if we do that. And yeah, so a couple things I'm going to go through. First of all, a lot of y'all took the AP Spanish Lit test today. One of the things I wanted to talk through is if you had issues submitting, issues logging on, I'd like to troubleshoot that with y'all tonight or possibly early tomorrow so that we can get that out of the way and make sure you don't run into any more issues. But it's technology, and obviously you will run into issues. You're bound to run into issues. So, but whatever we could do to start, preparing for that just in case, and having backups, that is the goal. Today, I'm going to go through, the first part I'm going to go through is content. And then the second part I'm going to go through is writing the DBQ and just kind of little practice or little ideas on how you can make things more efficient. And then lastly, testing guidelines, procedures, and things that could be a little bit helpful in terms of setting up how you're going to be writing or typing and submission stuff. If you haven't done the AP demo, you really should practice doing the AP demo to make sure that you can submit. Even if you've practiced it, it doesn't necessarily guarantee it'll work. Again, you're working with technology, but I think it does give you a better chance of it working, and we can talk about how that works a little bit towards the end. And just in terms of cheat sheets, unit guides, and whatnot, really using that. But one of the things I'm going to encourage you to do is to limit how you use your cheat sheets. Use your cheat sheets for a specific purpose. It's not like you have all the time in the world and to get the maximum points. And I'll talk about that you can get, and just being efficient in that. We'll see how we can get to that. And remember, you can use Google, but it's how you use it is going to be really important, I think. And I'll share with you guys experiences in terms of what the Gov students had this year and some of the things that they worked on. So again, type any questions, any things that you guys I want to talk about. I reviewed units 3 and 4 earlier this week on Tuesday. um, so period 5, we're going to kind of go through a little bit of the content, but also a lot of how you can build into thematic uh, essays. There's a chance that the essays might be thematic and not just locked into one time period. So that'll actually give you guys a much bigger opportunity to connect events throughout history and not be limited to a time frame. Hopefully by now you already know how to answer within the time frame. Now we're just going to broaden that a little bit and make sure that you guys feel comfortable understanding how themes work throughout historical connections and whatnot. So really quickly, excuse me, period 5 is 1844 to 1877. And we're looking at, and I'm just going to go through kind of what AP's provided. Period 5, 1844 to 1877 is struggle in terms of the Civil War era, Reconstruction, 1844 from the Mexican-American War, right? Starting with the Mexican-American War and ending on 1877, the Compromise of 1877, which gave a shift of power and essentially saying that the North would give up on the South with Reconstruction and thereby let Jim Crow laws and racism continue to continued in the South and until 1960s when the Civil Rights Act and Brown versus Board of Education happened. So 1844, 1877 is what we're looking at in terms of the time period right now. Again, Manifest Destiny. And if you remember when we talked about this in class, the Civil War and slavery was not just an issue on morality, right? The North wasn't necessarily concerned about the morality of slavery, although there was an ever-growing understanding of that, especially with books like Uncle Tom's Cabin, the Underground Railroad, and those movements and the abolitionist movement. But on another aspect of it was the idea of a political control aspect of it, right? This idea of the Compromise of 1850 and dividing, which lands are free, which lands are slave, and by creating this, okay, you get one and then you get one. So, states are coming in and being, and joining the union in two. Well, what happens when people in a certain state don't want it, right? And so this idea of manifest destiny and expanding the United States leads into conflict of the, of this debate on slavery, right? And so it centers around slavery where there was a moral issue of it, but there was also a political power and control issue of it. And the North wanted more control because, again, when you have more control, you get more say in the laws, you get more say in the taxes, and the representatives of those states can sway policies and legislation into one area or another. And with the differing concepts of industrialization in the North and plantation and raw goods in the South, there was always this tension between the two sides, right? And that spans back into Unit 4 when we're connecting it thematically with the Tariff of Abominations and definitely connecting to this tension between the North and the South and government favoring one side or the other. And so when we look at that, this leads to this idea of popular sovereignty, right? And in popular sovereignty, we are looking at, sorry, give me a second. In popular sovereignty, we're looking at states being able to decide for themselves what they would want, right? And that leads to Bleeding Kansas and John Brown and whatnot, right? Leading to this idea. In class, we did the whole thing on was he a martyr or was he crazy or was he like a martyr, right? Did he do it for the right reasons? And if he did, were they rationalized or were they not? And this idea of popular sovereignty allowed people to decide for themselves whether or not that was good or not, right? And so this idea of regional differences is another aspect of, you can connect the regional differences of the North and the South all the way back to settlement, right? From Jamestown to the northern colonies and settling for religious reasons. And so understanding that in the DBQ, and this, I'm kind of going to blend it a little bit, but when you're looking at DBQ, one of the points that you get to answer or get to receive is this point for understanding perspective and point of view. So I'm going to pull that up really quickly. Demonstrates a complex, this is the last point, right? Demonstrates a complex understanding of historical development that is focused on the prompt using evidence to corroborate, qualify, modify. So you're going to explain how a point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience is relevant to the argument. And so you're going to, if, for example, the DBQ is on Reconstruction or the Civil War, you're looking at how the point of view of these documents share or exhibit the point that you're either trying to defend or you're trying to support, right? Or support or to argue against. And when you write that claim, the point of view in these documents are going to be, in history and U.S. history, it's definitely very clear where that is. Now, on Tuesday in the AP session, we talked about, hey, how do you Google the source? How do you source something and figure out the perspective on what they were trying to achieve with the 30-second Google search, right? And make sure you're practicing, maybe not practice that, but make sure you know how to do that, understand that, because the point of view is going to be completely important. We practiced it with one of the previous, or with the practice AP test that I gave with the practice documents, and you saw the perspective of a preacher, right? You saw the perspective of a politician, right? And so understanding how point of view needs to support or argue against your claim. Looking at those differences, and for a lot of compromises, the Compromise of 1850, the Missouri Compromise, all of those compromises, well, eventually compromise ran out, right? And so this idea of this failure to compromise leads us to the Civil War. And so the Civil War then gives us this launch off point, right? In 1860s, as Abraham Lincoln does the Emancipation Proclamation, frees the slaves, but doesn't really free them. And really, he only frees the slaves of the South, which had already seceded. And one of the biggest points of reference, if, for example, this was the DBQ that you have to answer tomorrow, keying in on your OneNote and the Declaration of Causes of Secession by the individual state, and just coming to an understanding of, hey, look, these states left because XYZ, right? And if you don't remember that, go ahead and take a look at that. If you have no idea what I'm talking about, feel free to ask me afterwards. What's up, Daniel? So yeah, understanding that, I think that's really important. And so then election of 1860 and then secession, and then military conflict in the Civil War. I didn't cover too much of the military conflicts in the Civil War. I think we went through a few of the battles, but if you need a refresher memory on that, I think that could be important. Knowing the Stonewall Jackson, Ulysses S. Grant, knowing the generals in the war could be important, but only as a point of reference, right? Again, College Board and AP is not trying to test you on your knowledge just because they know you could Google things, right? They're going to test on your connections and your ability to connect and bridge themes and bridge ideas in terms of cause and effect, contextualization, the idea that time, like change happens and continuity over a certain time happens. And yeah, I think that's going to be really important. Excuse me. One of the other things, sorry, I'm going to pull up this because government policies, and understanding the Emancipation Proclamation, uh, Lincoln's leadership. The three amendments that happened in the 1860s: the 13th Amendment, 14th Amendment, and 15th Amendment. The emancipation of slaves as a 13th Amendment, citizenship, and due process in the 14th Amendment, and then the 15th Amendment, we are looking at the right suffrage for Black males, right, or males. And those three amendments happen. We call them the Reconstruction Amendments. And by 1865, the Civil War ends. The states join into the Union, and this era of Reconstruction happens, right? And this era of Reconstruction, to put very quickly, was desire to reconstruct the United States physically in terms of the buildings, bridges, infrastructure that were destroyed throughout the Civil War. It was a reconstruction of the economy, right? How do we bring back and how do we make this economy fair and good for everyone, especially now that the South needs to be reconstructed because they no longer have their primary source of labor, right? Free labor. They do, and they found their way around it, which is during this Reconstruction time, they used sharecropping to kind of get emancipated or free slaves, free Black men and women to continue to work because they didn't have any, they weren't literate, right? Blacks, for the most part in the South, weren't literate. They weren't able to get the jobs. They needed a lot of support, and slave owners are like, okay, well, I'll pay you a little bit. I'll give you a piece of land. You're free technically, but essentially you still need to work for me because that's the only way you're going to eat, right? And that becomes, something that carries on for quite a bit. And then the last part of the Reconstruction is the reconstruction of the mentality towards Blacks and the mentality of how society needs to be able to run. Well, now that Blacks were quote unquote equal with whites during that time, how are they going to live like that, right? And so obviously you look through history, and even today, even with all the things that are going on today, right, just as recent as this week and last week, or actually it's been brought out, with the shooting in Georgia, things aren't fair, right? There's still a lot of racial tension, but how did that progress? Like, because it didn't just, stay the same, right? Like things like Jim Crow laws, and then things like the idea of separate but equal. And so Reconstruction happens and tried to solve a lot of these issues. It tried to solve a lot of the problems that society was going through. It still continued to restrict people of color, males of color, because females don't get a chance to vote until 1920, right? But this idea of reconstructing the minds and how society was going to work, and white people still wanted, again, to maintain control, right? And so white people, and primarily white people that had wealth, put in laws of literacy tests and poll taxes and grandfather clauses and things that pretty much, even if you filled one, there was always another obstacle if you were Black or of color, to restrict you from voting and restrict your access. And so understanding that the balance of power was trying to be controlled still, yet, it obviously improved and changed when senators and congressmen were elected people of color, mayors were elected people of colors now that they could vote. And so that started to shift a lot, right? And then even just this movement of literature and of, shifted from like William Lloyd Garrison's The Liberator and into, literature that explained, how things could progress. And I think that's actually really important because it showed that there was a resistance to the change, right? Or resistance to those fighting against the change. Ultimately, though, the idea of Reconstruction sounds really nice, but in 12 years, it was it failed. In 1877, the election of 1876 ended up in pretty much a tie, and it was really close. What ended up happening in Reconstruction then was the South said that they would give the North the presidency if they would withdraw, because the National Guard and troops were stationed in the South to make sure Reconstruction was happening, right? And so South goes, hey, you take your troops out from the South, let us do our thing. We're not going to cause any trouble. We'll still abide by the laws, and we'll give you the presidency. So at first turn, at the first chance, when the North actually, if they continue to persist in the change, maybe things would have happened, maybe not. But the North gave it up. The North gave up. They gave up on reconstructing the South and allowed them, at least for the next, 80, 90 years, to continue in perpetuating racism and perpetuating the systems of inequality, right? And so Reconstruction ends in 1877 because of a presidential nomination. They give the South gives it up, and they were okay with it because they got more freedoms, even though the presidential office wasn't necessarily in favor of them. Okay, so we look at this idea of comparison in 1844 to 1877, period 5. So one of the objectives in terms of what was supposed to be taught is this idea of using, comparing relative significance on the effects of civil war on American values. So understanding that during expansion and during the Civil War, and even prior to the Civil War, leading up to the Civil War, that you can see either the argument that you make is either that it changed a lot or it didn't change that much, right? And obviously it's history. You can make that argument for both. You just have to be able to justify it, okay? You can talk about the idea of the economy. You can talk about the idea of morality, but regardless, you're going to obviously have to base it off of the documents that are provided, plus the documents and the outside sources that you know. So, making sure that you're keying in on that. Any questions for period 5? Give it like a few more minutes. I'll give you like 2 minutes for any questions. Any questions? Any questions for period 5? Can you say that Reconstruction was effective to a certain extent, and then say why it was effective and why it wasn't? Yeah, so I would, okay, so here's the issue with doing that. The issue with doing that is it either makes you look indecisive and you're essentially claiming something and then you're weakening your own claim. The way that I would go about it, and this is, again, the point for the final point, demonstrates a complex understanding of historical developments as a focus of the prompt, using evidence to corroborate, qualify, and modify an argument that addresses a question. So, so you can confirm, one of the ways to get the point is confirming the validity of an argument by corroborating multiple perspectives across themes, right? That is supporting it. But qualifying or modifying an argument by considering diverse or alternative views or evidence, right? And so you want to make your point strong with your claim. You can say that, and actually this is a really powerful way of going about it, is if you feel comfortable sharing the counterclaim, but then defending against your original stance that your thesis is about. Because your thesis can't be, well, it's kind of both, okay? Because then you're essentially restating the prompt. Excuse me. Your thesis really should be, one argument, and then as you're developing your argument in the first two paragraphs, in your third paragraph, you can go, well, hey, here's one of the counterclaims to that. But despite this, XYZ, and you can throw in context in there too, right? You can say it's okay to admit the counterclaim, but you have to defend against that counterclaim if you're going to share the counterclaim. And hopefully we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to the DPQ section. Any other questions for period 5? Okay, if you do, feel free to throw it in the chat. Otherwise, I'm going to keep moving on. Period 6, 1865 to 1898. This is the Gilded Age. This is the populist movement. This is industrialization, economic development. This is imperialization, right? Or moving into imperialization. So a couple of this, let's see, when we're looking at, here, I'll just go through this really quickly. Technological advances is one aspect of it when we're talking about like the Bessemer converter, moving from iron into steel. Looking at perspectives of the economy and labor, right? And how things start to develop in the latter part of the 1800s. Immigration from various different places, Italians, Irish, Germans, Scottish Irish, right? And during this time, and then also building the railroad, and as that gets finished, the Chinese Exclusion Act, and how immigrants played a role in the labor, right? We talked about the jungle. We talked about, how factories and how jobs that required labor were pushed onto immigrants because they were cheaper and they were easier to get rid of, and they're by producing a lot of major cities that whether you're talking about the Rust Belt and Ford and creating the cars and the automobiles and stuff, or you're talking about textile industry in New York or whatnot, right? And so understanding that all of that plays into a role of technological advances, immigration and whatnot, right? Migration also in terms of within the United States, not just international like immigration, but migration from moving, a move from blacks in the South to the North, right? And, moving away from the plantation into industrialization. The Gilded Age produced new cultural and intellectual movements, public reform efforts, and political debates over economic and social policies. Knowing a little bit about the Gilded Age, I think there's a little bit more. Yeah, there's more than one. I'll get to that. Let's see. Settlement. And during the Gilded Age, U.S. government violates treaties with American Indians, and then confining the Native Americans to reservations starts to happen during this time as well, in the Gilded Age. The New South. So, like I mentioned earlier, again, this time period overlaps, right? 1865 to 1898 overlaps with 1844 to 1877. So this idea of the New South, meaning sharecropping, it's no longer run by slaves, but technically the same people, just a different name. And then this idea that one of the major court cases there's like 5 major court cases in U.S. history, starting with Marbury versus Madison and judicial review. One of the next ones that are big is this Plessy versus Ferguson, which happens in 1898, 1893, 1892, something like that, 1890 something, where they rule that separate is equal. So having separate cars in a train for blacks and whites is fair and it's okay. It's equal. It's just separate, and separate doesn't mean equal, right? Or separate doesn't mean unequal, right? And so yeah, and then technological innovations, the expansion and increasing use of these natural resources, industrial capitalism. Okay, so with the growing labor force that is mostly immigrants, we're looking at the idea of the production lines, right, and maximizing efficiency, and so that pushes workers to become more efficient, and increase the production of goods. Now, this is important because you're going to connect it to period 7 when we have this boom of our economy in the 1920s, the roaring 20s. Everything seems like it's going good, and because of this time in the late 1800s, where things become more efficient and growing, well, all of a sudden, things that happen 50, 60 years later, and the crash comes as a result of this overproduction of goods, right? Business leaders sought to increase their profit by using a thing known as monopolization, right? We looked at a couple key monopolists, and whether it's Rockefeller's Standard Oil Company, yeah, right. And so I think that's really important for us to understand monopolies come during the Gilded Age. I mean, if there was anything that is being talked about, it's this idea of labor, monopolies, and whatnot. And then, okay. And then, sorry, the second thing that would stem from that with monopolies is this idea of this increasing idea of unions, right? And so unions coming up during this time and this era as a way to protect workers, a way to to give them more rights and to fight for the better wages and better conditions. And you look at the different strikes that happened during this time. The one we looked at in class was the Pullman strike. There are a few other strikes that you can look through. Just look through Gilded Age strikes, and that is a reflection on industrialism and industrialization and capitalism and the workers, right? So again, the argument, if I ask you, the question is, how good or how effective was American industrialization in the Gilded Age? Well, you can argue that it was really good because it produced more and it got more people jobs, and it made our society develop and to build these cities and to create massive infrastructure in the United States, whatnot, right? But then you can also argue that other side, which is, well, at the cost of what? At the expense of immigrants, at the expense of what was going on there. And so you need to be able to understand that, again, there's two sides of the coin, and which coin do you think is more relevant, and you can support it with the documents that follow. So strikes, capitalism, monopoly, immigration, let's see, and then we, in 1890s, we talk about and then development of the middle class comes as a result of that as well. So corporations need for managers and male and female clerical workers, increase the access to educational institutions, foster the growth of distinctive middle class. And so the middle class happens during the Gilded Age, which then goes on to fight and become the a lot of the progressive era reformers come as a result of that, right? Laissez-faire as a policy happens during this time. So letting the businesses do whatever they want, and the government just goes, hey, remember, you get to do and run your business however you want. We're not going to interfere that much. And was that a good thing or a bad thing, right? And the response post laissez-faire or post Gilded Age is Teddy Roosevelt comes in as a trust buster and goes, look, no, you can't do that, you can't do that, you can't do that, right? And so is that Teddy Roosevelt being too controlling, or is that the presidents during that time being not controlling enough, right? And this, the politics of the Gilded Age comes from the Populist Party, or otherwise known as the People's Party, mainly stemming from farmers and their shoot, hold on, sorry guys. Their disagreement of the policies that were really for businesses and not for them. Can you guys, sorry, give me a second. Someone needs to mute themselves. Melanie, I think it's you. Okay, so sorry. Yeah, and so you can look through the populist parties, like, you know, what they fought for. You know, they want the silver-backed dollar. They wanted, more control in the government, and so looking that up could be valuable. So the last thing here is this idea of continuity and change. So there's a lot of change that happens in the Gilded Age. It's smack down in the middle of period 5 and period 7, right? With a lot of overlap, right? So again, 1844 to 1877 is period 5, and this starts at 1865 and ends at 1898. Period 7 starts in 1890, right? And so because it overlaps in that, there's a lot of shift, and they put in period 6 so that you can understand the idea of immigration, technology, the economy, and how capitalism and the markets work, and even the struggles between farmers and corporations and business people, right? So all of this shows continuity, and it definitely shows change. So looking at how the change of technology led to XYZ, right? Or the continuity of racism and whatnot led to XYZ, right? New systems of production and transportation enabled consolidation within agriculture. And how did farmers react to that? Migration patterns in industrialization, cultural and intellectual movements, public reform efforts and debates. And so the Populist Party, you can argue, continues on throughout time because the Progressive Era comes from the Populist Party, right? And so I think that's important for us to understand. I know that was a quick version of period 6, and there might be some things that you need to review. But are there any questions for period 6? Any questions? Yeah, okay, so yes, this idea of social Darwinism also takes place during this time as a response to the liberation of slaves, or the emancipation of slaves. And so Darwin writes, why am I blanking out in the book? He writes that, what is it called? Origin of Species, right? Yeah, okay, good, thank you. Origin of Species in 1850s, 1860s, thank you. And then then that transforms this idea of social Darwinism, which is, well, we're smarter, we're better, we can make this money, therefore, like that's just natural, right? It's just life. And so and then you can go into the different ideals of different monopolists, right? And this idea of the gospel of wealth that uh, you know, certain business people that were like, well, yes, we do have this, but we're going to use that wealth to help support charities and to help those that are less fortunate. Um, so,
Or like survival of the fittest, right? Like we're rich because I was watching a video and they were saying how like, oh, they're poor because they're lazy, or like that's what they would like.
Yeah. So this idea of social Darwinism does play on that fact, and even to today, it's like, well, you're not rich because you didn't work hard, right? And so that's really important to note. Yeah, that's really important to note, because if you don't, because that was the attitude of this like laissez-faire, right? Like, hey, honestly, we want the best businesses to survive, so we're just going to let them run it. And so if businesses run rampant and don't have laws, and this time period brought up a lot of issues that needed to happen, because, well, if it's survival of the fittest because I'm getting support from politicians that I paid off, am I the fittest just because I'm richer, and I can pay off to neglect responsibilities or pay off to get a leg up on this, right? No, that's not necessarily true, but that's how they played it off a lot, right? This idea of social Darwinism, and it is survival of the fittest. But then we soon realize in the next time period, and we'll get to Unit 7 in a second, that it's social Darwinism is flawed because it benefits people not necessarily for their ideas. It benefits people because of their race, because of their gender, because of that, right? Because, well, is survival of the fittest that males could vote only and women couldn't vote? Like, does that mean no female representatives means like survival of the fittest? No. Like, and if the survival of the fittest mean that politicians give you the land when you ask for it because you paid them, right? And that's when we're talking about Boss Tweed. Boss Tweed happens during this time, and corruptions in major cities happen in this time. So no one's stepping in and no one's fighting for these people, and that's why it ends in 1898, because it's another election year, right? And the era of progressive presidents comes in. And the era of progressive presidents starts with Theodore Roosevelt, right? Who fights for the little guy, right? Who fights for those that don't have a voice, that fights against major trusts and major companies, and against, yeah. And so we'll talk about that in a second. Hopefully that makes sense. Let's see, is it in chat? When you're writing DBQ, is there a specific time you have to stay in? But in the last paragraph, can we make a connection to the event? Yes, and I'll talk about that and how you can build contextualization in that towards the end of this. So let's move on to this. This is the last time period, but it is the longest time period, and it is, I think, a very important period in time. Normally, because there's period 8 and 9, but since we end at 7 for this year, or for at least this test, I think there's a chance that you need to know period 7 pretty well. Okay. So period 7, talking about imperialism, it starts with the Spanish American War. Okay. For our class, that's when we did the skits, right? We had the Spanish American War in Cuba, Spanish American War in the Philippines, imperialization of the United States in terms of yeah, Panama and all of our where we decided to stick our hands in. And so looking at Latin American countries is one of the understandings that you need. Um, Key things: the U.S. main explosion, right, leading to us getting into the war, which leads to this idea of yellow journalism. We talk about Pulitzer and Joseph Pulitzer and William Randolph Hearst as people that portrayed uh, like we were being attacked by Spain, but in reality, it was just a mechanical malfunction. And then, yeah, and so understanding imperialism, how did we feel like we had the right to, stick our hands in all across Latin America, and in the Philippines, um, and so Theodore Roosevelt comes in, and as much as there's a lot of things that he did well, he did expand the power of the presidency by going into other nations and not necessarily declaring war, but still going to war, right? And even and so there's a lot that goes in there. But he drives a movement of progressivism that really lasts and culminates throughout this whole time from 1890 to 1940, or from really 1900 to 1945, with the end of World War II and FDR, right? So looking at the progressives, if you remember our progressive bingo sheet and looking at all of those different people, I think it's important to know a few of them. It doesn't matter which ones I don't think, unless one of the documents is about them, which hopefully then you'll be able to recall. But look through who are all these people that were middle class, but fought for those that were underrepresented. Excuse me. So yeah, from photographers to writers to the whole house to Upton Sinclair writing the book, The Jungle. There's so many different aspects of the progressives, and knowing who they are. One of the things that if they do give you a source, if this is it, you want to make sure you look at point of view and the perspective of that, right? Like, why were they so adamant, or why were they so pushing for this? And I think when you start to look at their impact and what they were fighting these causes for, you start to see an improvement within society, right? And it's not just like, oh, we're becoming a richer country, but we're becoming a better country to help in XYZ, right, way. And so knowing the impact of the progressives is just as important as knowing what they did. So again, anyone can Google what they did. Anyone can Google an author, wherever the source or the quote that comes from it. Like, anyone could do that. But if you can't state the impact, that's going to be a difference between points, between scoring your 3 and your 4, or your 4 and your 5, right? Or 2 and a 3, right? And I think knowing how to explain that impact, because again, analysis and reasoning for the document, explain how or why the document's point of view, purpose, historical situation, or audience is relevant to the argument. Meaning the relevance is a lot oftentimes looking at the impact and the significance of it, right? Cool, like the Hull House is made, right? Or cool, they wrote this book, or cool, drew these cartoons, or cool, whatever. But unless you can say, well, this changed this, right? Or this gave in more courage or the right to stand up, and which then impacted voting. Those are all definitely really important aspects of it. And so being able to draw significance and draw impact is definitely going to be huge when you're looking at the progressives in this time. And so then World War I, military and diplomacy, the home front. How did the shaping of us getting into World War I, which is like looking at looking at the economic side of it, right? I showed the chart that showed like, oh, we were declared neutral, but we didn't jump in until I think it was 1917 or whatever, right? And we were already providing resources and things to Britain and the Allied nations. And so how did economy play into this? How did the economy play into World War I, right? And then how did how did us coming back and having to do with the League of Nations and understanding how the war impacted America, which is, well, women need to take on more working roles, and then things that kind of mirror into World War II, like victory gardens and whatnot. Like, how did America change and shift as a result of World War I? And the home front is important. And then leading into cultural and political controversies, or looking at things that happen within, I guess, the context even of women voting, right? Gaining the right to vote. And then you look at the 16, 17, 18 amendment. Oh, and then, one of the biggest controversies, right, is this idea of like the temperance movement, right? And prohibition, right? And so as prohibition gets enacted and within all the states in the mid 1910s, late 1910s, how did that affect the United States, right? How did that affect the economic aspect of it, right? How did that affect the agricultural aspect of the United States, right? And then all of that, leading up into the Roaring 20s, everything feels good. Everything seems like it's doing well. Overproduction, people spending very confidently, and then leading us into the Great Depression, right? Which is, well, people were buying on margin, and people were spending money they didn't have. They were borrowing money to make money, and then soon, when everyone decided to pull out their stocks and pull out the cash, well, they had realized everyone had borrowed so much that no one actually really had any money. Banks ran out of money, and everything went to crap, right? And this goes on during President Herbert Hoover's administration, and the development from this. Whoa, we're spending a lot, and we're making a lot of money, and farmers felt good, like people in the cities felt good, right? And manufacturers felt good. Everyone was making, but there's so much in these storehouses that all of a sudden the Great Depression happens and no one has any more money to spend. And these companies that had spent so much making what they anticipated to sell but couldn't sell, not everyone was broke, right? You're a business, you're broke. You're a worker, you're out of a job, right? And so, and it goes even worse because Herbert Hoover goes, hey, you know what? Continue to spend, trust that we'll do okay, blah, blah, blah. Tries to do a little bit too late, right? Builds the Hoover, or starts construction of the Hoover Dam, and does too little, too late, and we go spiraling into this depression. And we need someone to pick us out of it, and none other than FDR, who comes in and issues his claim that he has a New Deal for the United States, and in the first 100 days of his presidency, enacts a big portion of his New Deal agencies, the alphabet agencies. I mean, you need to know the concept of alphabet agencies, but you really didn't need to know like two or three two or three of them, right? You know one really well, and that might be your outside source that you can tie into it if it's on depression or if it's regarding, you know, getting us out of the depression or whatnot. So understanding the New Deal and how that played a role in the United States is actually pretty important. And then, you know, we get through a lot. We get through a huge portion of this. We go through 2 terms of FDR, the New Deal, and then what happens is we get to World War II, and World War II becomes big because, you know, you can say that. I mean, you can argue that the New Deal works, but then you can also argue that the New Deal just sustained us and kept us afloat until a large boost and stimulus into the economy with a world war, right? And so then World War II happens. This idea of, again, mobilizing and moving people from you know, men into the military, and then women into those jobs, right? This idea of Rosie the Riveter, idea of Victory Gardens start to pop up again, and then even we talk about like Blacks and Native Americans and people moving into you know, helping in the war and playing pivotal roles in World War II. And that, right? Yeah, we didn't really go too much into World War II and the battles, but I think if you want to look through that, you can. And then post-war diplomacy. Post-war diplomacy, we're looking at how did the end of World War II spark the beginning of the Cold War, right? And now I know we don't go into period 8, but knowing that tensions between us and the Soviet Union arise during this time because, one, our use of the atomic bomb, and then spurring on this arms race and space race and whatnot. But you know, knowing that post-war diplomacy shifted, we tried to support European countries with the Marshall Plan. We started to support countries with food and with supplies. We started to support Germany, and Germany was split up. And then looking at post-war, like the League of Nations, we decided not to join the League of Nations, but post-World War II, post-World War I, we decided Congress didn't want us to join the League of Nations. Post-World War II, we jump into the United Nations, right? And then to wrap this up, this idea of comparison in period 7, corroborate, qualify, and modify an argument using diverse and alternative evidence in order to develop a complex argument. Looking at, let me see if I can pull this up. Comparison of transitioning in the economy, comparison of the progressive era, comparison for policymaking, like the New Deal, right? And remember, just because the New Deal had good ideas doesn't mean everyone was in favor of it. Yeah. That's period 7. Any questions? I mean, I know there's probably a lot that I missed. That's just the major concepts that I think are important to cover, but I'm sure there's more. Any questions? Okay, no questions. let's see, if you're on Teams, actually, never mind. We'll do that later. Okay, cool. What period do I think the DBQ will mostly be about? Okay, so I guess this would be a good time to transition into the DBQ. I made the mistake with Gov. It wasn't a terrible mistake, but it was a mistake of assuming that if I were to write the FRQ, this is what I would have for the first part and the second question. So they had 2 questions. You guys only have 1 question. So I found out after the AP Gov test that there are multiple versions of the test. So I am willing to bet that they have one that's on period 3, one that's on 4, one that's on 5, one that's on 6, and one that's on 7. That's my guess now. So I would say be ready about all of it. I will say, though, that periods... Actually, I can look at the percentages here. If you're looking at high percentage-wise, let's see if I can find it. Okay, so this year they made periods 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 10 to 17% of the test. And so I would venture you would be 6. I mean, 7 has the most years within it. I think there's easy periods to study for. I think periods 5 and 6 are easy to study for. Civil War, Reconstruction, and then Gilded Age, immigration, and stuff like that. Those are really like concepts that you can bring together really easily and study. The breadth of period 7, because it's 55 years, as well as the 50 years or 48 years of period 4. Actually, I think period 3 would be easy to compress it and study as well. But I think periods 4 and 7 are important ones to definitely be covering. But let me go to the part about studying for this test. You want to make sure you can explain significance. So conceptually understanding how timelines are, like events in a timeline are connected are important, right? Can you build a connection between certain events? Can you build connection between events that seemingly, they might not seem like they're that related, right? Can you build a connection between the Gilded Age and the Roaring 20s? Can you create a connection between, the Bank War and the Great Depression, right? Like, I think those are, that's the farther you go, the less likely that'll happen. But within any given time period, can you build those connections? And I think understanding that in history is going to be the key to success here. And so understanding, the themes that AP gives us are understanding, American identity and national identity, work, exchange, and technology, understanding geography and the environment, understanding migration, understanding politics and power, understanding America and the world stage, and then America by regions, and then social structures. And so tying in these themes, I have a feeling that there's the possibility that themes might be covered, which opens up, if you feel comfortable with the timelines, then it'll be easier, right? But really, let's talk about the DBQ. So the DBQ, if you guys have the packet that I gave you guys, awesome. If you are at Sarah and don't, I can send you that. I'll post it in the Facebook group if you guys need it. But if you guys can look up the rubric for the DBQ, and also this graphic organizer, understanding how to group your documents and understanding, one, creating your thesis with a defensible claim, right? I know I keep saying that, like, that's got to be point 1, and that's got to be done, right? That's got to be done easily. And then secondly, we're looking at, grouping those documents and understanding how to group those documents. So I think College Board recommends you spend 10 minutes brainstorming and pulling that together. Feel free to use your graphic organizer to outline how you're going to write it in the in those first 10 minutes, right? But don't waste any more than 10 minutes, because then you got to start writing it and putting it together. The key part to this is they give you 6 documents and you only have to use 5, meaning you have 10 minutes to build an argument. You have 10 minutes to figure out how you're going to do the contextualization and defining all those things. You have 10 minutes, in the same 10 minutes, don't make it seem like I'm doing 10 minutes for each of these things. In this 10 minutes, you have to read through all these documents, figure out the source, figure out the point of view on 2 of them, right? You have to understand what they're saying, and so you're grouping them and you're putting them together. And this whole time, you have 10 minutes to kind of fill out this graphic organizer so that you can start writing, right? And when you write, one of the things I'm going to remind you is get to the point. Okay, this is not an English essay. It's not about how eloquent you sound. It really is about answering all points of this rubric, right? If you can get your thesis and your context in 3 sentences together combined, awesome. They're not asking you to have a paragraph, right? No, Kevin, I did a graphic organizer that kind of broke things down simply, really quickly on my own. I encourage you to make your own, but I'll show that. I'll send that to you guys on the Facebook group so you guys can see it. But it's really simple. And so, using this graphic organizer, it just talks about setting up your thesis, writing your defensible claim, and then grouping it, what documents go where, and then having central documents that you use to key in on each, and then supporting documents underneath that, right? And again, like, it doesn't say write 4 paragraphs. Like, it doesn't say write 3 paragraphs. It tells you get a point for analysis, you get 3 points for analysis and reasoning, you get 1 point for thesis, you get 1 point for contextualization, you get 5 points for evidence. And it tells you just need to use 4. I mean, the reality is you can write 1 long paragraph with all the evidence in it, and you could get all the points. It doesn't mean you'll be successful, but it definitely does. I mean, it doesn't show organization, but again, organization is not a point in this, right? It's the idea of, can you present all the evidence? Obviously, writing it in a nice, neat way is awesome. But you don't have to sound super nice. If you guys remember reading, or if you guys have read DBQ answer prompts in the past, not all of them sound super amazing, right? But you can get all the points without sounding super amazing, right? And so don't waste time on words or sentences that show no relevance just because you feel like you want to restate something. If you want to restate it and you're trying to bring up a certain part in your thesis or restating a part of the prompt, that's fine. Just remember, like, make sure everything you do has a purpose. Okay. When we talk about evidence, just a reminder, you need 4 documents of evidence and then 1 outside source, or if you want 2 outside sources. So a total of 6 documents gets you 5 points. That's actually a lot. I mean, you're asked to recall 2 outside sources and 4 out of the 5. Oh, is it 4 out of 5? Yeah. 4 out of 5? Yeah, I think it's 4 out of 5. Yeah. So 4 documents that are given to you as sources, and then 2 outside. So 6 documents. And so in your rubric, which hopefully you have out printed or next to you during this, and I'll talk about setting your workspace up probably tomorrow morning. Yeah, so you have the rubric out. Every time you use a source, as you write it on your actual one, check that off. And after you write, your evidence, your analyzation, check that off. And so by the end of it, you should have 6 checks to show that you got all 5 points. The best thing about this is, y'all, evidence points supports an argument and response in 4 documents, right? If you accurately describe rather than simply quote, so just quoting doesn't help you. but accurately describing the content of the 4 documents. And in addition, the response must use the content of the documents to support an argument in the response to the prompt. So you want to make sure you understand what 4 of the documents are saying, be able to explain what's going on and describe, right, which is to explain what's going on in the document from the point of view, and then point of view actually goes to analysis and reasoning. So you can actually, without just restating or just using a quote, be able to share what's going on in each of those documents. And then I think the easiest part is bringing out 2 outside sources. So you have 4 documents that are there. You have your thesis and your defensible claim, and you go, okay, what other things fall in the timeline that support this? And that's where your cheat sheets are going to come into play. Y'all, your cheat sheets probably don't come into play for your thesis. Your cheat sheets don't necessarily come in. Actually, cheat sheets will come into play for contextualization, right? So 1 point for your cheat sheets helping you contextualization, but not your thesis. And then for 5 points, well, 3 out of the 5 goes to evidence that's actually already in there. So maybe you can draw connections between the documents that AP provides you with your timeline, but really it should just help you recall it, right? So I would maybe say those 3 points don't even go to that. But the 2 points of outside sources definitely will come from those cheat sheets. So if you look at this and then you talk about analysis and reasoning, and the final 3 points in this, is it 4 points?
It's 3.
Well, why do I only see 3 points here? For analysis and reasoning, it says 3 points, but I only count 2 points. Oh, 3 points total. Yeah. Okay. So 3 points total of analysis and reasoning. So explaining point of view and then the complex understanding, that has nothing to do with the timeline. So your cheat sheets only help you with 3 documents. Now, why do we have that? Because if you could secure 3 points out of can't do math right now, 10 points, 3 out of 10 makes a difference between a 3 and a 4, 4 and a 5, right? Something like that. So, but the reality is most of the points come from, if you just relied on your timeline, you're only getting 3 points, right? And so that's not going to help you pass no matter what. Okay, no matter what you say, those 3 points is not going to help you pass, but they will help you bridge that gap from a 2 to 3 or 4, right? 3 to 4 or 5, whatever, right? And so understanding the analysis aspect of it, point of view, purpose, historical situation, audience, the whole soapstones thing, speaker, occasion, audience, purpose, subject, and tone, right? And so understanding that will help you get to a place where hopefully you're more comfortable reading the documents. And using the graphic organizer to outline those understandings will help really bring that out, right? So when you're in the graphic organizer, when you're looking at this rubric, man, as you're writing, like you need to go, oh shoot, okay, I need to make sure I identify the point of view. The author of document D's point of view, or so-and-so's point of view, is that he is writing to persuade blah, 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 right? Or his audience is the northern states, right? The freed states, right? Etc. And I think that's really crucial in understanding that, because if you don't understand that and if you don't push for that understanding, you're missing out on 3 key points right there, right? So I think that is really important. Oh shoot, sorry, I didn't know someone maybe typed a question. Okay, cool.
I have a question.
Go ahead.
I don't know if it's gonna sound dumb or I don't know, but I know you went explained a little bit, but for sourcing, what do you does it mean staying within the time period that it's given to us and using our timeline to talk about another event and be able to connect that back to our claim?
Yes.
Or is it, it's that?
Yes. And so I think Mia also asked a question regarding this, and so let me explain. If not when, okay, so if your DBQ prompts gives you a time frame to exist within, you must exist within those. Aside from the contextualization point and possibly the complex understanding point, most of those points will have to align within the time period that is given to you. Now, that's not to say they all will give you a time frame. If it doesn't give you a time frame and it just gives you a theme, maybe it goes, well, a major theme within the United States is the right to suffrage. Well, all of a sudden, your idea of suffrage goes from everything from the 15th Amendment in 1860s to the 19th Amendment in 1920, and then you can even talk about like suffrage for youth, right? With I'm blanking out 25th Amendment, right? I think the 24th, 25th, I think. No, 24th Amendment. Right? No. Actually, yeah, 24th Amendment with going against poll taxes. And then the 26th Amendment, sorry, which is the right for people of 18 years and older to vote, right? And so stay within time frame unless you're talking about the context, which then you can broaden before and after, or before or slash and after, and then the end time frame or the end point, which maybe broadens the complex understanding into an outside source, which could be beneficial. But try to stick with, if they give you years, they're giving you years for a reason, because essentially they'll give you years because when the rubric comes out, and someone who's reading your answers has a rubric of acceptable answers, they're only going to fall within that time period. Aren't we supposed to look at the source or the excerpt and source it based on one of the four things, which are point of view, historical audience, and purpose for sourcing? Yes. Yes. And remember, the idea of sourcing is to know who's saying it. So if Abraham Lincoln's saying something and the topic slavery, you know he's going to be for the North and against the slave states, right? If you know, a historian is saying it as a secondary source, then maybe you're looking at something that's maybe not as reliable because it didn't come from that time period, but maybe from someone that's researching it. If it comes 50 years after the fact, right? Again, sourcing also plays into the years. If the source year is way later, then you also got to know that, hey, is this as reliable as something that was happening or that might have been given to us closer to the event, right? So that is important. So understanding that as well, right? Was this person giving a speech? Who is he giving the speech to, right?
Wait, so sourcing, is it what Anna and I said combined, kind of, or are they two separate points?
No. Oh, wait. So, you were asking about sourcing?
Me?
Yeah. Well, okay. So sourcing, yeah. So sourcing is from the excerpts that are given to you, right? You're not going to source an outside document that you give because you already know the source. I guess you could explain it as a way of sourcing, but sourcing, think of as sourcing as like potentially knowing who or why this person is. Knowing who said it helps you know a little bit about why they're saying it, right? If you're in the, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
So like an example is, okay, you're trying to buy a car, okay? And I go, okay, I know someone that can help you with the car. and then I give you a number of a car salesman, what do you think that car salesman is going to do at Toyota, right? Well, he's going to try to get you to buy a Toyota car, right? He's not going to go, you know what? The Mercedes store right next door is like definitely like a better price and all. Like, no, like by knowing, if I just tell you, hey, my friend's going to help you buy a car, you're going to be like, okay, cool. If I go, okay, but just for your information, he's a Toyota car salesman, so he'll probably try to get you. So then you know, oh, he's probably gonna try to get me to buy a Toyota. Does that make sense? So you purchasing the car or you doing what writing the document doesn't, it only changes your perspective on how you approach it just because you know, well, this person's writing in this way. I don't want a Toyota, but this person's trying to sell me a Toyota. And so that source might not necessarily align with, okay, man, I'm looking for a Honda. Well, I can use this Toyota guy and what he's saying to go, oh man, like it potentially is a good car, but this actually helps me want to buy a Honda more because blah, blah, blah. Does that make sense?
So sourcing is using POV and everything that Anna said, and then the outside source comes with the timeline staying within the time period and then connecting it back to our claim.
Yes. Okay. So here's the difference. Sourcing is looking at who's writing the document. A source is what they're giving you, or the outside source is something outside an event that happened outside that was not given in one of the 5 or 6 documents.
For example, like the effect of it or the cause of it, that it probably won't isn't stated in the documents.
Well, that would be an analyzation, right? And so when you're looking at that, I think it's important to state that. But in outside sources, let's just say 4 of your sources, let's just say we're talking about the American Revolution, and one source was an excerpt from the Sons of Liberty, stamp backs, right? The Boston Massacre picture, right? And the Declaration of Independence. So you have all of these things. And then on top of that, you go, okay, they've given me these things. I want to write about these things. But something else about the American Revolution that supports my claim, which let's say America was justified in starting the war, is the French and Indian War. Now, it doesn't have to be a result of anything. It's just another reason why your claim is true.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome. Any more questions on the DBQ in terms of that? I really think having the rubric in front of you is probably one of the most useful things out there. The graphic organizer, take your time to do that, and then make sure you guys are writing and getting all that stuff done. Any more questions for the DBQ? How do you know what information is in what time period? So that's where the sourcing is going to be really important, right? And so the sourcing is actually going to be really important because if you have your timelines and your cheat sheets organized, which you shouldn't really be spending time like flipping too much. Like you should know, okay, cool. It's in period 3 is 1754 to 1800. And maybe you have a cheat sheet, one cheat sheet for each of those time periods. Have a post-it that says 1754 to 1800. You go, boom. Okay, let me look. Okay, boom. I know this event, this event, this event. This source comes from this event, whatever. So having that is important, right? So knowing, oftentimes, either the prompt will give you parameters of the years, or the it'll either give you parameters for the years, or in the source, in the bottom of each source, it'll give you a year, right? And I think that's actually important to just make sure you keep track of. I don't think it's something you need to stress out too much about. I think it's just something that you just need to be mindful about. It actually, here's what I'll tell you. I actually think that if you do have the time period, the parameters in that, I would take all your other cheat sheets and put them far, like within reach, just in case you need them. But all other time periods, except for the one that you need, or maybe the two that you need, if they give you a larger time period, and you put them away, so you just have those two in front of you, so you could focus. I actually think it might be better, right? And I think it can be beneficial that you focus in on that. So, um, yeah. Any questions there? Okay. Sounds like we don't have any more questions regarding the DBQ or the content. So let's talk about, actually, I'll talk more about this packet tomorrow in terms of what's in here. One thing that I would say is, make sure you have one thing to make sure you guys have, I have, an understanding and read through the requirements in terms of read through the rubric and then read through the graphic organizer. Those will help you be immensely successful. And then, other than that, like, I think you guys are going to be okay. Let me double check something really quickly. Our test is tomorrow at 11. Starting at 10:15, I want to have the check-in with everyone to make sure you guys are good to go at around 10:50. Like, I'm gonna have you guys sign off of Teams, or I might do this on YouTube if Sarah kids want to jump in. I will be open to go to talk about a setup and how I think this packet could generally help you. I'm going to do I'm going to be on at, let's see, if I go 10:39, I'll probably start at 9 o'clock for any last minute questions where you guys will probably be studying and doing some other stuff. You do have to sign in 30 minutes before. So I'll tell you what I did with my AP Gov class. So I met with them from, I think it was 10 a.m. to 12. And then from 12:15, we started 12:30, we started the process, but I had everyone check in. I had you guys tell me, are you writing? Are you typing? And I ran through like some of the sources that you might need, just any last reminders. And so we'll talk about that. Okay. So if you have any questions, we'll run through. I'll probably be on at 9 tomorrow then. Okay. We'll go from 9 to about 10:30, and then 10:30 will be good. So we good? Okay. I'll stick around for a second. Give me a second, and then I'll be back in a few minutes. Okay, take a stand-up break, and then we'll be good. Give me a second, okay? And think of any questions that you guys might have. If you're here on the Teams call, can you just give me a thumbs up so I can know you're here? I can look back on the chat and see if you guys are here. I just want to know who was here. There's 30 of y'all, which is pretty good. So just give me a thumbs up. Don't leave yet. Give me a few minutes. Cool. So, um, okay. So the last thing I want to cover is this idea. Um, I don't think you get recorded during the test. I'm pretty sure you don't get recorded during the test. Um, the last thing is one of the things I would encourage you to do tonight is one to review uh, your cheat sheets and your resources because you definitely do want one of the guidelines that you're not supposed to have shared documents. And so putting it in for those that are in my class in OneNote under AP review with their individual pages is going to be key because then you can access those accordingly um, or have them printed out because one of the things you really don't want to get caught doing is like cheating in that sense, especially because it's open note and literally one of their only things is, hey, uh don't have a shared document, right? That's it. Okay. We'll talk about preparation of that of the of your documents and I think printing out is definitely really good. Otherwise, spend today, those of you guys who are doing shared Google Docs, copy and paste all that stuff into a separate Google Doc or into your OneNote so it's just you. Now, you can have the same thing as another person because you're not submitting your cheat sheets, but you just can't have it as a shared document, which is going to be important. You're not allowed to have Discord open. You're not allowed to have any of that. So don't violate those policies by doing something dumb. If we share Google Doc but don't use it at all, yes, that is fine. You should. But so what I'm saying is take that Google Doc and all the stuff in there, Command A or Control A if you're using a PC, Command A and then Command C, so copy that, and then Command V into a separate document or into your OneNote. Yeah. So,
What did you say that we couldn't have?
no shared documents.
No, the other one. I forgot what it was like.
Oh.
Sure you
So someone in YouTube is asking, can you have Discord open, which is like an open chat with like an open voice call with other people. So we can't go on Teams and start talking to each other about like the test.
Oh, okay, thank you.
Yep. So I would say start to move all of those things into your own personal space. But remember, like you don't want to get confused with all these tabs and have your internet crash or have your Safari or Google Chrome like crash and all that stuff. So one of the things I would make sure to do is one, make sure your device is good today. Make sure your device is working. I know some people ran into issues with the AP test today and submission. Does anyone have any concerns about that regarding that? Because one of the things I really would encourage you to do is go to cb.org/AP demo and run the version. If you plan on typing, practice submitting it. Now they have you do a run through before you actually take your test, but you want to make sure that you have the capabilities of doing that. Doing that tonight will help us get a head start of it tomorrow. Because if you sign in at 10 o'clock tomorrow and 10:30 and go, oh man, it's not letting me submit, I can't give you a backup option then, right? If you can work through it and go, shoot, it's not working. First thing tomorrow, 9 o'clock, hey, Mr. Liu, like this, like, okay, I can help fix that. That's fine. I can problem solve 5 times. So that's a good question. I think both work really well. It depends what you're comfortable doing. Submit by file, you just definitely need to save. And I'll explain the procedure tomorrow on how that could work. Copy and paste definitely works faster. Okay. But just in case you're not copy and pasting, you need to know how to submit by a file. So having it in a Google Doc, and then you can save as document and then submit that as a file, or you just copy and paste it and put it in. You're fine either way. Any questions?
Do you want to take the test for me?
I'd love to not take the test for anybody.
Mom is,
Huh?
my mom is laughing.
So yeah, I think like it's really important that we key in on the important stuff. I think it's easy to not be confident in this, but know that the cool thing is, at least for my class, we literally hit everything from up to period 7 at a very comfortable pace all throughout. So the content, I fully believe the content is all there. I fully believe that they know that the content is there. So that you're prepared in every sense of that. And we've been running this back and forth literally all year. So I fully believe it. The question is execution, and when you sit there, that you don't freak out, that you're getting timed and whatnot, because yeah, y'all are good test takers too. Daniel, I'm not sure, but why risk it? I mean, you can risk it if you want. That just sucks if you get caught. Cool. Run AP demo, practice that. If you guys have an opportunity, yeah, if you guys have an opportunity, start setting up your desk space and like everything that you guys are gonna do. We can work on that tomorrow, but I'd like to have that all ready and ironed out. I posted the um, on the Power School of just the 4 different things: having your physical space set up, having your mental space, knowledge space set up, and then just your confidence in being that. So I encourage you to look through that. Set up in a space that is going to be good for you, and I'm sure you guys are going to be just fine. Are we good? Sorry, I'm just gonna give me a second. Any questions now that maybe I might not be able to answer, but hopefully I'll be able to get to you guys. You get to figure out for tomorrow. Any other questions? Feel free to shoot them to me if you need. 9 to 10:30, I'll be on. Okay, I have a staff meeting at 8 or 8:30 or something like that. Make sure you get your rest. Cram a little bit and then get your rest, but you need to be sharp tomorrow. What time is Comunidad? Comunidad is at 11. No, Comunidad is at 1. You know what? Let me ask. I feel like you don't have to go to Comunidad. I'll ask, but I doubt that will make you guys do anything. No, if you have been studying, you don't have to. Just go through the rubric and make sure you know all the points and how to get them. Pamela, don't be nervous. You're going to be fine. Okay. Are we good? If you guys have a timeline on your wall, or like if you're pretty proud of your timeline and your cheat sheets, can you take like a good solid picture of it? Or actually, if you guys can take a video of it and just be like, I'm trying to put some compilation together. Yes, I want you guys, if you do have it, like really quickly, this is for everyone. If you were impacted or influenced by that one that I showed, like take a video of it and be like, give us a little like quick 10-second thing. Yes, send yours again, but do it in a video form. Do a picture, but then also do a video form of just like, hey, this is Anna, like, like I don't know, do like a little commentary of it with the video and then send it to me. I want to put it together on something. It'll be fun. So if you have a timeline, take a picture of it, the ones on your wall, or even if you like do a bomb ass like cheat sheet thing, like take a picture of all of it. I want to see it. And then, yeah, don't worry about it. We're going to chill, Natalia. You'll be okay. We're going to be cruising.
Wait, so we don't have like a final project or anything that you're just going to throw?
There will be like small things that we do, but they're all going to be like, I think period 8 is one of the more interesting periods with civil rights movement and like connecting it to today. But let's worry about one thing at a time. Worry about this. So no, you can send the video after you're done. Just don't tear down your wall. If you guys have a wall or a cheat sheet that's dope, like before you rip it up or whatever, I just want you to do, that'd be funny, Ocean. I want you guys to like take a picture of it and be like, hey, this is blah, 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 period, blah, 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 and like show it and then just give a little, I'll send a Jupyter message with instructions. It's okay. You've only had 24 hours of it. So, okay, y'all. Okay, relax. You'll be fine. Okay. It is 8:50. I'll see you guys later. Sarah, hang on for a second. I'll chat it up with y'all in a little second. Yeah, it is draining, but so is life. Can you show a bug with a message? I don't know what that means, but sure. What's a bug?
A little literal insect that she has in her room or that she had to kill.
Okay, sure. That's good, Ocean. I'm glad you got your rest. Now it's time to grind. Grind for A-Push. How'd you guys feel about your Spanish test? Oh, that's nasty. Make sure you get your sleep. I'm gonna be honest. Like, okay, so a lot of you guys felt good about Spanish lit. I told y'all it would be easy. A-Push is gonna be even easier. Hey, sleep when you're dead, right? You'll be fine. All right, let's stop chatting. You guys go get to studying. You'll be fine. Okay. You guys are prepared, and you guys will be preparing for this. So I'll see you guys later. Enjoy the rest of your night. I'll hang on if you guys want to ask questions. I'll leave this on for another like 20 minutes if you guys want, but otherwise go and study. I'll be here if you need me on Teams. I'm just gonna mute myself really quickly and then keep the chat on, okay? Love you guys, study hard.
Thank you, Lou. Have a nice night. See ya.
Thank you. See ya.
Guys.
Bye. What's up, y'all? Who's in here? There's 5 of you. Is this all Sarah right now? Who else is here? I'm doing okay. I'm hanging in there, trying to do a lot for my school and just trying to get some stuff done. I've been grinding pretty hard, doing a few different things, and so it's been tiring. But staying alive, definitely. No, I'm not gonna go on a hike. You can go on a hike. I'm technically not even supposed to like. I'm not supposed to like be near you guys or whatever. Like the district's super strict about that right now. Yeah, I'm doing okay. Just can't wait for tomorrow to be over, and then I move on to graduation stuff and whatnot. Hey, who are the other 3 people in here? Who are the other 5 people in here? Say your name. I wish you could see who's in here. What's up, Julie? Who else? Ooh, it's growing now. There's 7 people in here now that I'm done. What's up, Peter? Hi, Madison. So, um, that's true. Then it went down, and then people jumped back in again. So hey, really quick question. I mean, just for you guys, one, was it helpful? Two, is there anything that you need clarification on? I went through periods 1 through 4 with my class on Tuesday. But literally we've been doing review and I see them twice a week and I do an AP session once a week with them. I probably should have invited you guys. I'm sorry. But we've been meeting 3 times a week and they've all been showing up. So I've been doing a lot with them. Is there anything y'all need that I can do to help out or whatever? You know what? I wasn't Zooming because our school district didn't allow for Zooms with the Zoom bombs and stuff. So technically, if it was just you guys, I probably could have used the Zoom and it would have been fine. But I wasn't sure if any of my students wanted to jump in on this too. We need to do a badminton Zoom soon, and we need to do one to plan for the senior thing soon. But I want to wait till AP tests are done before we move on to that because I feel like that was important. Yeah, so we kind of had, yeah, Coach G definitely did that with y'all. We kind of because we have so many coaches for us to check in with you guys' grade level. So I checked in with the seniors and their future and stuff like that. And Coach G took care of y'all. Awesome. Yeah, he told me that. I haven't seen yet. Yeah, so we're gonna get rolling on that, but I think there's just a lot that we're just trying to take care of right now and trying to focus on. I need to focus on this AP stuff, and once that's done, I can start to work on some badminton stuff, and we'll be good. So I'm actually going to be throwing out a challenge for us as we roll into this after senior night senior night, and rolling this out with y'all, which is hey, let's make sure we do some workouts, and I'm gonna give you a workout regimen and some stuff. Oh, what's up? Hi, were you here the whole time, or did you just jump in? Nice. Well, I think this records and you can click the link later and then it'll share with you what we were talking about. So Yes, that's why we're doing this. Okay, so just really quickly, hey, were there any questions that you guys had? Any clarifications? Anything like you were curious about? I want to answer those now because I don't know how much uh I'll be able to help you guys with tomorrow morning. I'll open up this YouTube thing again for tomorrow, but I don't know how much that it could help you. I'll give you -5 duck walks for next year. Wait, hi. What do you think this is for? It literally says. Wait, how'd you get the link? Oh my gosh. Yeah. So if you heard Annie talk. What? Julie, I feel you. I have no idea what Hai is talking about either. Like none of except for I haven't studied at all. I have no idea what you're saying, Hai. Hai. Oh my. Okay. Here's yeah. So I need to end this so that Hai can watch the first hour and a half. Um. Jeez. Okay. Yeah, juniors. I'll probably. When's your? You guys have Spanish. You guys are taking Spanish language as juniors, right? Or did you guys already? Oh, you're not. Okay. Okay. Are you guys taking any other AP classes? Calc or something next week? English. Okay, cool. So once English is done, we'll meet up and we'll talk about what we could do for the seniors. Okay, sounds good. Hey, y'all, I want you guys to study. So I'm gonna open this up at 9 o'clock tomorrow. I'll send the link on the Facebook. If you guys want to jump in for some last minute stuff, I'll also. Oh, what? Really? That's cool. When did he find that out? Wait, that's cool. Okay, cool. Hey, I'm gonna sign off. It's 9 o'clock, but I miss you guys, and I will. Dang, that's cool. Okay, I will. I'll see you guys tomorrow morning if you guys need help, and yeah. Okay, bye, guys. See ya. See ya. Good night, y'all. Study hard. Study hard. Bye.